Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another video session as we talk about clauses, identifying independent and dependent clauses. This is the video associated specifically with a set of worksheets called Workbook 7 Types of Clauses. It's a very intense set of worksheets, and we'll be spending a lot of time in class going through these together. Let me go through this very quickly with you and show you what's here, and then I'll come back up to the top and we might go through a few of them. So it starts with identifying independent and dependent clauses. We have a set of sentences, a set of clauses. Some of them are independent, some are dependent. And this is simply identifying, do we recognize the ones that make sense versus the ones that do not make sense? Page number 2 is we start getting into more of the independent and dependent recognitions here, but in real sentences. And then we identify whatever's in italics is what we're trying to focus on, if it's independent or dependent. It's pretty straightforward. And then page 3, we move on to specific types of clauses. So we now focus our attention to dependent clauses, and they are used in several different ways. Dependent clauses have a very specific function, purpose inside of the sentence structure. So we start with adjective clauses. So we know that all of these are going to be correctly written, not like some of our future worksheets where we have some problems with the phrasing, with the clauses, and we use our process to identify how we can improve them. What I like about this set of sentences is they are all correctly written. So we're not worried about right or wrong. We're just identifying what's going on in these clauses. So we start with adjective clauses, and there's an A and B section here. And then we move into, on page 5, we move into adverb clauses. Same type of thing where we are identifying where the clause is, and we recognize that they are being used as adverbs. Again, they are all correctly written, so we know we're not dealing with any editing types of things with this worksheet. And then we move on to noun clauses. So again, noun clauses, a clause that can be used in any way that a noun can be used. So subjects, predicate nouns, direct objects, indirect objects, object of preposition. We have example of all of those in here. So we're trying to find those in these sentences. And then finally, we end with a paragraph that is about Louis Braille. He's the Frenchman who invented the reading and writing system of Braille. For those who are blind, but it is a paragraph in the context, and then we break down each sentence and we find out what's going on inside of each of the sentences to kind of prove that we do write this way. And once we understand how we write, how we're putting our words together, we understand that by doing things effectively, that our messaging can be very clear. And we do this all of the time. And this is one of my paragraphs that I talk about to show how we can use this process to correctly edit. Again, this is going to be a good paragraph, so there's nothing necessarily to edit, but understanding that process helps us understand that words have a purpose, and the combinations of words helps us with message clarity and understanding what we're trying to get across. And then finally, on the very last page here, this is primarily our 4 or 5 step process, but I added a couple of extra things here. So what we are doing with our clauses, we are, number 1, trying to find the verbs. We find all the verbs that are in the sentences, and those recognitions of verbs kind of help start the process. From the verbs, then we identify the subjects that go with those verbs. We ask the question who or what plus the verb that we think that we found. And then we find the rest of that thought. We call that a predicate. So the subject plus the verb, and that there's anything that's supposed to be with that. We try to find where those complete thoughts are, whether they are independent or dependent. That's going to help us identify if they are independent or dependent clauses based on how they make sense or if they don't make sense. And then finally, we look at the conjunctions, and that's really going to help us identify if we're dealing with independent clauses that are being joined or if we're dealing with dependent clauses that just need help. If we have the fanboys, the coordinating conjunctions, and we know that we're dealing with independent clauses. If we have subordinating conjunctions, which is a long list of other types of conjunctions, then we know that we're dealing primarily with dependent clauses that need help. And we do talk in class about the different relationships. How we treat those conjunctions is very different. Step number 6, as we identify those independent and dependent clauses, then that helps us understand the sentence types that we're dealing with. A simple sentence has one independent clause. A compound sentence has two or more independent clauses. Complex sentences have one independent clause and one or more dependent clause. And a compound complex sentence has two or more independent clauses and one or more dependent clause. That all sounds very messy, but as we go through these lessons, hopefully it'll start to make sense to you. I treat the language development very similar to a math class. It's very formulaic, and as long as you can plug words into those formulas, then things start to make sense. So hopefully that'll be a little bit of a connection for those of you who are more math-minded than word-minded. Step number 7, we identify the functions of the dependent clauses, which is one of the primary focuses of this set of material, is as we look at adjective clauses, adverb clauses, and noun clauses, identifying that they do exist and there's a very specific purpose for them. And then we understand what those purposes are as we identify the types of clauses that we're dealing with. Okay, so going back up to the very top. Sorry for a little eye adjustment here. So let's look at number 6. Number 6, each applicant is thoroughly tested. So if you can recognize that as a complete thought, then all we would need to do is capitalize that, put a period at the end, and on the line we would put independent for an independent clause, which is different than number 8, although the plot was very original. That doesn't sound like it's a complete thought there, and it's because of that word although in the front end. So we would put dependent there, and then we're not going to mess with any punctuation or capitalization there because we don't know what the rest of the sentence could have been. Moving on to exercise B, let's look at number 3. Hanukkah usually comes in December. That's what we're identifying. That could very well just be a complete thought. So we could have had a period there. It already has the capitalization there. So that is an independent thought. We have the word and there, which we recognize as one of the fanboy conjunctions. And because it's and, we know that it's going to be joining independent clauses. And just to double check, we would look at the last part of it where it says it lasts for 8 days. That is also a complete thought. So that whole context makes sense. There's 2 independent clauses there joined by the coordinating conjunction and, which is different than number 7 because guinea pigs seldom bite and are easy to take care of. That doesn't make sense. So that's a dependent clause. But we do have they make good pets. So in the context, when we put all of those words together, it makes sense. But the small clause here that does have 2 verbs, bite and are, and it has a subject, guinea pigs. Guinea pigs seldom bite and are easy to take care of. It has the subordinating conjunction because, and we recognize that relationship is a little bit different. We have to say that word with the rest of the clause. And whenever you put all of that together, it doesn't make sense, which means it's a dependent clause. Okay. So that's what we're going to be doing with the rest of the worksheet. We'll tackle the adjective and adverb. Sorry, I went a little too fast. Adverb and the noun clauses in class together. They are very intense. And I think those will be better if we spend the time together in class going through those. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let's get started on this worksheet. Talk to you later.